Jaliek Rainwalker was born a victim of abuse. At birth, he was addicted to alcohol and cocaine and was given up for adoption at 2 days old. Due to the circumstances of his birth, he faced severe developmental and behavioral issues. Jaleek went through 6 different foster families before finally, at 7 years of age, being placed with the family that would adopt him. 5 years later, on November 2nd, 2007, Jaleek's adopted father, Stephen Kerr, would awake to find Jaleek missing. Now, 14 years later, many suspicious circumstances surrounding the disappearance have been uncovered, but Jaleek has never been found. Welcome to Fact and Suspicion. I'm your host, Dan, here with my co-host, Ben.
Hello.
And today we will be discussing the disappearance of Jaliek Rainwalker.
And Daniel, I don't like to brag, but you may have noticed that this is the second week in a row that we have done an episode.
Yeah. Yep. We are.
It's kind of a big deal.
We're getting them out there. And next week we're going to try to have another one.
And maybe even the week after that.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Go for 4 in 4 weeks. Wouldn't that be amazing?
I think that would actually be the first time that's ever been done.
Maybe not, though.
In the history of podcasting.
I thought you meant the history of Fact and Suspicion.
Oh, it's definitely the first time it's been done in the history of Fact and Suspicion.
Well, let's hope. At any rate, let's hope.
But we are trying. That's the point here.
Yeah, and this is very new for us doing the video versions. Yeah. So we have a lot of kinks to work out every week. So.
No question.
Yeah, but let's get into the episode. Let's talk about Jaliek Rainwalker. Now, Jaleek was, as we just said, born under very rough circumstances. His mother was an alcoholic and addicted to crack, and Jaleek was born with both those in his system. And he had fetal alcohol syndrome, as well as just a list of other issues that came from this. He as he was growing up, he did have some developmental issues, but mostly he had emotional issues. He had a lot of violent outbursts. He would threaten and sometimes attack family members, and these fits would last sometimes up to an hour. And he'd been known at times to just go bang his head into the wall when he's doing this. So he was a really troubled kid.
Yeah, though, I mean, that's a bit extreme, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, I think developmental issues, even serious developmental issues, are normal for children of drug-addicted parents.
Yeah, and
he grew up without his parents, did he not?
He did. Yeah, he was put up for adoption at 2 years of age, and we don't even know. We can't really find much information about his actual birth parents.
Okay.
We know he's biracial, but I don't even know. I know that one parent was African American, one was white, but I don't know which one was which.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
You would think you hear the last name Rainwalker, and a lot of people assume he's Native American, but he is not. That's the family that adopted him were, I don't mean to say this necessarily disparagingly, but they're sort of hippies, and they gave all of their children the last name Rainwalker, even though that wasn't their last name. So that's why, a lot of people ask that question, but that's why he has the name Rainwalker.
Okay.
Now, while he was troubled, he was, I cannot find a picture of this kid anywhere where he doesn't look really happy. He had a lot of good times as well, it seems. He was a happy kid. And they say that, when he was not having one of his outbursts, he actually did really well with everyone else. Seemed to be well balanced, other than these occasional or sometimes frequent.
Do we know how he did in school?
Well, it's really...
And I don't just mean his grades, I mean behaviorally as well.
So from the age 7 on, he was homeschooled. So we don't know for sure. And something we'll get into in just a second is an issue he had at the homeschool.
Okay.
But let's get into his history a little bit now. The family, before the family that finally adopted him, the 6th family, they had actually planned to adopt him. Things were going well with him, but he actually attacked one of their daughters. And they decided they couldn't and they had to move on. So he went back into the system. And then after he went to live with, it's Stephen Kerr and Jocelyn McDonald. They're a husband and wife. They just had different last names. They did finally adopt him. He lived with them for 2 years before the adoption.
Like
and then
foster?
Fostered for 2 years, and then they adopted him.
Okay.
Now, they had 3 biological sons, and they had one other adopted daughter. Kerr and
Were they at
McDonald.
least good adopted parents?
Well, let's talk about that, actually.
Okay.
It's
Poor kid.
I don't want to say that they were necessarily bad parents, but there are a lot of things that bring that into question. And one of those things is they lived in a very, everything I've read calls it a non-traditional lifestyle, but they lived in a home with no plumbing. So there's no running water. There are no toilets for them to use.
What year was this?
It was in the 90s. He was...
How did an adoption agency let that happen?
It was in the 2000s. Well, okay, so we should point this out. They were not living in that house when they made the adoption, okay? But after the adoption was completed, they moved into this new place because an adoption agency would not allow that to happen. Okay. You wouldn't. They wouldn't allow someone to foster a child in that sort of house, right?
Yeah, I'd hope
They have to go outside and use an outhouse. You can't even wash your hands. It didn't really, it had electricity because they had a generator they'd run from time to time, but it was very rare that they actually used the generator. They raised chickens and sold eggs at, farmers markets.
Were they Amish?
No, just as I said, I guess hippies is a term for it. I'm not trying to use that disparagingly. I don't know how to describe someone.
I'm fine with using it disparagingly.
They tried to live an off the grid lifestyle that didn't impact the environment. But take it as you will. I don't like that for adopted children. Also, there was only one bedroom in the house. Everyone slept in the same room.
Were there not? I guess after you're adopted, there's not going to really be anybody keeping tabs on you.
No, because that child is yours then. So
but what about during the foster system? I know that there's usually state agents that come around to check up on you.
Yeah, but they were living in a regular home when that was happening.
Right.
So, once these children are adopted, they're their children. It's just like any other family. Right.
Nothing they can do.
Mm-hmm. And, I don't like... So... If you raise your own children from birth, like everyone just sleeping in the same room forever, right? That's one thing. But when you're taking adopted children, they're used to having their own space a bit. I don't know if it's just not fair to put them in that situation, right?
No. And especially if they knew that they were planning on moving into that sort of lifestyle when they adopted and were just waiting for the adoption to clear so they could do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not ethical.
No,
and
not
the only said they all slept in the same room. The only sort of separation there is they hung a curtain for their daughter so she could have some privacy, but everyone else was just in the same room all the time. Now, as I said, Jaleek was homeschooled, as well as his adopted sister. There are reports though that the biological sons actually went to private school, and that's not ethical either.
So a difference in standard of education between the biological and the adopted children?
Well, a difference in standard for, you would think, more than just education.
But yeah, probably so.
If that's the case. But when you adopt a child, that child is yours. You cannot make a difference between them and your biological children. I can't say legally you can't make a difference, but you're not supposed to.
You probably shouldn't.
And ethically, you cannot do that ethically, right? When this is your child.
So, do we know if there were any other differences that were being made? Were the biological children just generally treated better by the family?
That it's hard to say. You've had some differing reports. I don't have good sources on them. I will say though that Jaleek, and I don't know if the biological children were punished this way, but at times Jaleek had been punished where the mother said Jocelyn would not allow him to use the outhouse.
Excuse me?
He had to just sort of go hit the woods.
Okay, why did you have any difficulty telling me that they were bad parents? Good parents don't use bathroom privileges as a punishment.
I agree. I don't want to start casting judgment already because we're going to get into a lot more about these parents as we go on.
They prevented the children from using the bathroom as punishment.
Well, they prevented this child from using the bathroom as punishment. I don't know about the others. I just know that this happened to Jaleek.
Jesus Christ.
From time to time.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about their fee-fees, to be honest with you, buddy.
Well, now, let's also, I would like to mention, Jaleek was very troubled. He had a lot of, we had the developmental issues, and we have severe emotional issues.
How could you blame him?
Well, he was not getting any sort of psychiatric care or medication for those either. I don't know if they just didn't believe in that. I guess it's
being the hippie sort, they probably didn't believe in psychiatric care at all.
Maybe not, though. I would think, if Jaleek was, he was under the, what's the phrase I'm trying to use? When he was adopted as a special needs child. And that is a different classification. I don't know what goes into that necessarily, but you would think there would be a legal obligation that they would need to get him any sort of care he needed.
You would think so, and that would be
especially because
part of the adoption agreement.
They were getting paid $1,500 every month. For having him, even not as a foster, as an adoption, right? Him and his adopted sister, she was special needs as well. So that's $1,500 for each of them, and that money. So we'll get into this.
Did they adopt these kids just for the money?
We'll get into that in a little bit. They may have, but I'm going to say, if you $1,500 a month for a special needs child, I don't think is that much money.
I mean, if you're compared to their total overall needs, probably not. But that's if you're fulfilling those needs.
Exactly. If you're taking care of this child the way they need to be taken care of, getting them the psychiatric care, getting them any medication, getting them any counseling they need. And obviously this child needed counseling.
Yeah.
Then that's going to eat up a good bit of that. And also providing things like a bedroom and running water and electricity. Those things go into, that $1,500 as well.
You shouldn't even have to mention those things. Like that should be expected.
Right. Exactly. And this is just part of my criticism here, but these are the things that happened.
Were they more like the crystals and incense type than like the psychiatric care sorts?
I don't have any reports of crystals and incense. I do know that at one point, Jocelyn's mother did mention her taking one of her birth sons to the doctor for just a regular checkup.
Well, that's good.
So, I mean, at least there was medical care for at least some of the children. I'm not saying that Jaleek wasn't receiving medical care. I don't know for sure. Right. Now, moving on, this is sort of the situation he was in. And obviously, I don't think this sort of living condition is helping his mental state any.
Yeah, probably not.
Now, Jaleek was homeschooled, and it wasn't just he and his sister. There were some other children that would come over and be in part of this homeschool class.
Mm-hmm.
And Jaleek threatened a 5-year-old and he, according to Jocelyn and Stephen, he threatened him with a violent sexual assault.
Do we know the specifics?
We don't know the specifics of it. This is just what's been told to us. Okay. And obviously, now that's a huge issue. You can't.
Yeah, it's a problem.
He's 12 and this is a 5-year-old kid.
Holy shit.
They're being homeschooled together. And we have a big problem when that happens. And at this point, Stephen and Jocelyn contact, child services, and they're saying, this is sort of the end. He's just become unmanageable with all these issues. And they try to see if they can reverse the adoption.
Like refunding a kid?
Pretty much, yeah. And obviously that's not, you can't reverse an adoption. Once you adopt a child, that child is yours. Now I'm assuming they could have, given him back to the foster system, given him up, sort of surrendered him.
I mean, surely.
But I don't know if that would have impacted the check they get for the other kid. I'm not saying it would have or wouldn't have.
Yes,
obviously, I don't think you'd be able to adopt again if you give back a child that you adopted. Not. But they were looking into it, right?
Kids aren't T-shirts that you picked up at Walmart.
No, they are not.
It didn't quite fit, maybe.
Well, and I mean, they did have him for 5 years. It's not like this didn't. They didn't. I'm not going to say they didn't try.
Yeah, right? 18 roughly is usually the contract.
That's not what I'm arguing. I'm just saying it's not like they did this immediately. They did have him for a while. Now, one thing I do want to mention before I move on to what exactly
I'm sorry, I
happened
just don't have
here.
any sympathy for trying to take the kid back. You do what any other parents would do in that sort of horrific circumstance. You try to get the child help.
Yes.
You don't just try to give him back.
Well, I don't think that he necessarily, obviously this creates a problem for the homeschool class, but he probably shouldn't have been being homeschooled with a 5-year-old, like a neighbor's 5-year-old either. If he has this much trouble, I'm not saying he's not safe to be around them, but after this happens, maybe you should split up the homeschool class, right? Instead of trying to refund the adoption or reverse the adoption.
Would those kind of disparate ages be in a class together anyways?
Well, I mean, you just have one, I think it was Jocelyn. You just have Jocelyn teaching them. It's not like you have separate classes. It's just she teaches these different kids homeschool. So, but again, I don't think, if he was unstable and had a history of possibly attacking other kids, I wouldn't put a small child in an environment with him all the time.
Of course.
I'm not trying to be unfair to Jaleek. Jaleek was a troubled kid, and but you have to take these precautions.
Well,
right?
yeah.
Now, what Child Services did suggest to them when they said, we can't reverse this adoption. You have some options, but they said maybe you should try a temporary respite care. And basically, what a respite care is if a caregiver needs a break, if there's some friction, then another foster family can take that child for a short amount of time, sort of give them a break. Or sometimes it happens, if, for instance, if one family's fostering a child, but they have to go, out of state or out of country, and they can't take that child with them legally, then a respite caregiver would take them for a little while until they get back.
I didn't know that existed, but.
Well, it's just unless you're familiar with the system, it's probably not something you would know about. But he did go to a respite house, which is just another family, and he stayed there for close to a week. I believe it was 5 days. I've read some different articles. One says a week, one says 5 days. It's hard to say exactly. Now, he stayed with Elaine and Tom Person for that 5 days. And he was supposed to go to another family soon after that. Stephen actually had to cancel a trip he was taking out of the country because he couldn't find any care for Jaleek other than the Persons. Now, he was going to go to another family soon after that, but he couldn't immediately. So Stephen picks him up. They go have dinner at Red Robin. This is November 1st, by the way, when Stephen picks him up. They have dinner at Red Robin, and then they go stay the night at Stephen's parents' house, actually. And the strange thing about this is it's the same town, Greenwich, New York, where Stephen and Jocelyn live. Okay. But he doesn't take Jaleek back to their home. He takes them to his parents' house. Now, his parents are not home. His dad is some sort of diplomat. He lives in Romania, I believe. But he's never around, really. He's always out of town. So I guess this is a house they just have access to most of the time. I don't have clarification on that, but they just went there to spend the night. But it is strange to me that they went to spend the night there when they could have just gone on to their home in the same town.
Is that going to play into
the
horrific thing that inevitably happens?
That's going to play into it. But I mean, do you find that to be strange?
Yeah, a little. I mean, I don't really understand the context very well. So
I'm wondering, and this is not something that information has been released on. I've been wondering if perhaps Jocelyn said, "Don't bring him back here." Right
I guess that's possible,
after that happened,
yeah.
So he's like, "Well, maybe I'll just stay at my parents' house and keep Jaleek there."
Okay,
maybe we don't have any clarification on that, but that's possible. They go to Red Robin. They go back home. Apparently, at some point, Stephen stopped and rented a movie. He may have done that before he picked Jaleek up. I don't know. But they go back home. Stephen says that he sends Jaleek to bed at about 9 o'clock. They go to sleep. He gets up the next morning at 7:30, and Jaleek is missing. When he goes in his room, it looks like Jaleek's there. He says that there's pillows and blankets stuffed up under the covers to make it look like someone's in the bed.
Implying that he was trying to mask the fact that he wasn't there.
Yeah, like maybe he had run away and was trying to, buy himself some extra time maybe. And that was 7:30 in the morning. Now, he also finds a note from Jaleek.
Okay.
And that note says, It's very short. It says, "Dear everybody, I'm sorry for everything. I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye, Jaleek."
That's short and to the point, I suppose.
Super short. There's another piece of paper with the word Albany written on it. And they said it looks sort of like a sign that a hitchhiker might hold up, like, showing their destination. Like,
Is there any reason Jaleek would want to go to Albany?
Jaleek did have 2 biological brothers that lived in Albany. So it is possible he would have gone to go to Albany. But I'm going to say something here. That short little note, to me, it doesn't strike me off the bat as necessarily an "I ran away" note. It strikes me maybe as possibly a suicide note as well.
Yeah, I didn't consider that at the time, but yeah.
And
could be that.
Just when I read that, I would think you'd panic about that, right?
Was it in his handwriting for sure?
Yes, it was in his handwriting. And there's another little side note to that. Just in 1 second, we'll clarify that he did write it.
Okay.
But that was 7:30 a.m. And now Stephen did not call the police until 8:57 a.m.
Excuse me? Why not exactly?
Well, he didn't say necessarily.
Oh.
Or he hasn't said publicly necessarily why he didn't call the police until then. Now, let's talk about that though, right? Let's talk about calling the police. I don't necessarily think, like, if your child runs away and you don't call the police for an hour and a half, I'm not saying about this circumstance, okay? But I'm saying in general, it doesn't always show neglect or guilt on your part, I don't think.
Okay, in my mind, there's a couple circumstances here. How old is the child?
Well, he was 12 in this instance.
Okay, that's too young. I would probably say call the police almost immediately.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I would have called the police.
I guess the second question is, have they done this before? And is there a place they usually go that you would want to check?
No, we don't have any history of Jaleek actually doing this before.
Absent those two things, I would say, particularly with a odd note like that could be read as a suicide note, you have to call the police immediately.
Well, I would say under a more normal circumstance, let's say your kid runs away and they leave a note. If you go out and you call the neighbors and you call their friends and you have people run around helping you look for them.
Well, that's the normal stuff, right?
I think you may not necessarily want to call the cops immediately because you don't want them to necessarily get in trouble or, have the police looking at them in the future for some kind of being a troublemaker, right? If you can just go find them real fast and help them out.
I understand that, but it seems to me that in the moment, you exhaust the few options you have, whatever friends he might be with, whatever relatives, and then you call the damn police.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just saying that I don't think you can count not calling the police on the surface as proof of anything, especially if they're out there. Especially if they're out there looking for their child, right?
Yeah.
If you're calling their friends saying, "Hey, did Jaleek come to your house? Can you take a look, in your kid's bedroom, make sure he's not there?" But we don't have any evidence that happened in this situation, though, right? All we know that Stephen Kerr did between 7:30 a.m. and 8:57 a.m. when he called the police was take a shower and return the movie he rented.
He returned a movie rental while his child was missing?
Yup. Now I'm going to say that fact right there may not imply guilt, but it implies the fact that you are a
piece of shit
parent. If you go return the movie you rented while your child is missing.
I mean, would it even cross your mind to do that?
No, I don't think that $2 late fee or $5, what the hell ever, it used to be, late fee is going to be crossing my mind if my kid's gone. I would be so panicked. Like, honestly, I might not be the type that would call the cops immediately. I would be out in my car driving up and down the road just in a panic, right?
How does that conversation even go? All right, I'm going to look for the kid. Hey, can you return the movie? Well, did you rewind it? Well, no, let me do that real quick.
Well, now, like, Jocelyn wasn't there to remind him to rewind. It was just Stephen.
Oh, dear God.
But
okay, Daniel, once again, how the hell did you have any problem saying that these were shit parents?
I just didn't want to say that at the very beginning of the episode. I wanted everyone to make up their own mind as we went along.
Everyone of the same mind at this point.
I'm presenting a case so that you can make up your own mind. And obviously, I think these are shitty parents, especially the dad. I don't know the mom's as bad as the dad, but the dad is a real piece of work.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, about that little...
It's just terrible people.
Runaway note, okay? If you'll remember, Jaleek had just been staying with the respite care family. That's Elaine and Tom Persons, okay? Now, Elaine said that Jaleek was really good for them while he was there. He was well-behaved. He didn't have any real bad outbursts, you know? And they got along real well with him. He seemed really happy, and everything was pretty good while Jaleek was there. Now, I'm not saying that this indicates that Jaleek really wasn't having those outbursts because, you know, sometimes with a new family,
it could just be a new environment.
It's relieved some of the stresses that were on him. Right. I'm sure he was happy that he could just go to the bathroom whenever he wanted to or take a shower, right? But Elaine said that little note, she said he wrote that at her house. That was, according to her, a homework assignment that Stephen had given him to write a letter apologizing to his class, his homeschool class.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not going to say that necessarily means that Stephen is this mastermind that said, I'm going to have him write this letter, then I'm going to use it to get rid of him. But if he had the letter and needed to cover something up later on, it's pretty handy, right?
Yeah. Not a bad little document to have laying around.
It doesn't necessarily sound like...
You know, if you're going to kill children, that is. Yeah.
I'm trying to say there's no evidence that he planned this, okay?
Okay.
That is a bit of circumstantial evidence that he may have. But then again, if you look at this guy, like look at what he said, look at his pictures, look at videos of him, does not strike me as any sort of mastermind.
You showed me a picture. Yeah, you're right.
He looks kind of, he looks derpy.
Well, look at the way he lived.
Well, I'm just saying, he looks derpy.
He acts clean
derpy.
cut.
Do you expect this guy to be able to plan that far in advance to have him write this letter?
I mean, it's not like it would take a genius to have a child write a letter and then kill him.
No, this dude's a dumbass, though. And it would have been a week in advance he was planning it. I just don't think this guy can do that. Okay, I just don't think he can.
So you don't think he killed him?
I'm not saying I don't think he killed him. I just don't think he can plan it that far in advance. I just don't think he's that bright.
Maybe. I don't think it takes that many brain cells to realize, to think, well, I want to kill the kid, but I need it to seem like the kid might have ran away.
Well, we'll get into it a little bit. I lean toward if he may have killed Jaleek, it may have been more of a spur of the moment thing, like his temper got away from him. It doesn't seem to me like he's the kind of person to plan it, if that makes sense.
And this was after Jaleek had made those threats, right? About the child. Mm-hmm. It might have been easy to justify. Like he was protecting someone.
Excuse me. There's no justification.
No. I'm not making a justification.
I understand that. But I don't see how anyone can justify that in their mind.
I'm trying to come up with what a crazy fuck like that might use as justification.
Well, at any rate, we have this
crazy
letter.
People convince themselves of just about anything.
Well, that's very true. We have this letter.
Okay.
We have Elaine Person saying that Jaleek wrote that letter at her house, right?
Okay.
Now, make of that what you will.
Is there any reason to dispute that, her story?
No, not at all. Other than the fact that it doesn't strike me as the kind of letter that you would write as an apology to your class.
Yeah, it does seem weird.
It does seem weird, but if I don't see why she has any reason to lie. I mean, obviously she, as you'll see later on, she does not like Jaleek's adopted parents. Mm-hmm. But I think that she has good reason for that of the stuff that she learned about from this later on. Okay. I don't think at this point she had any reason to lie about that, though. This is probably part of what convinced her that something was bad.
Okay,
right?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Now, I do want to note that person, she became a real advocate for Jaleek, though. And arguably, I say arguably, she really did more to go out there and try to help locate him and work toward finding him than his adopted parents did.
That's not surprising.
she and Jocelyn's mother, which had been Jaleek's grandmother, Barbara Reilly, actually got together with some of Jaleek's other former foster parents that still cared about him. They just, they weren't equipped to deal with him, right? Got together and formed this Find Jaleek task force. And they really did a lot of work. They created a website, findjaleek.org. Now, that is no longer still up today. I don't know why, but it would not be too far-fetched to assume it's something to do with Kerr and McDonald's lawyer trying to get taken down, because that website was very critical of Jaleek's parents. I mean, they told stories that were...
it seems to me that any honest account of that would be critical of the parents.
Well, I'm just saying there are a lot of stories that, and I don't want to bring too many of them up, because a website like that, obviously it's skewed in one direction. So, and if you don't have any other sources,
right.
But it told some disturbing stories. Like it talked about, how Jaleek would be banned from using the outhouse, for one thing,
Christ.
right? That's one of the stories that website would tell, portraying Kerr and McDonald as, crappy people. They were, just putting that out there, but we don't know if all these were necessarily absolutely true. Another thing,
if even half of it was true, these people were worthless.
Another thing that's on the website was, back when they had the home where the kids had their own rooms, said that Jaleek would be locked in his room at night. It's just,
my God,
you can't do that.
Kid.
I mean, I can understand, like, if you lock the house up so that the kid can't get out of the house, you don't lock them in their room.
Like, I just don't understand. If you're going to abuse children, like, why adopt more of them?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they abused any of the other children. Maybe it was something to do with Jaleek and his issues. Maybe again, they've been accused of adopting these two kids just for the check they get every month. And I'm not saying that's
a pretty common. That's a pretty common accusation, particularly among bad foster parents.
It is, and I think that's possibly that's a statement about our foster care and adoption system in general in this country.
Yeah,
like I'm not saying you have really good people that provide foster care.
And to be clear, that they should get some payment. I mean, if for no other reason to help the child.
No,
right?
exactly. Like these kids, and I would say a kid like Jaleek with a lot of needs, I would say, $1,500 a month for that child. That's probably going to, you would need that to provide the kind of care they need to make sure you're making sure this kid has clothing, enough food. I think it's important for foster and adopted kids. Let's say that Jaleek in another house, let's say he was with a family and he started playing baseball. Now, this is just a for instance. This is not something that really happened with Jaleek, but like he got used to playing baseball and wanted to play baseball, right? Well, when he moves to another family, that money could go toward making sure that he can be on a baseball team and, buying his bat, his cleats, whatever equipment he needed, stuff like that. I think it's important for kids that, they maintain some sort of stability when they move houses.
Well, of course.
And something like that, I think the government should make sure they get to do that. I think, let's say this child, is on a basketball team, loves basketball. If he has to move houses, they should make sure when they put him in a new house, say, now you have got to make sure you're going to get this check, but you got to make sure he gets to be on a basketball team.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. I mean, it'd probably be difficult to mandate specific things like that.
Well, I just feel like
I think the most important thing is to make sure the resources are available that the child is taken care of properly. Because when it comes to children and people who are taking care of children, particularly in the foster system, we could probably afford to be a little more charitable than we are.
Right. And that's what that $1,500 is for. And I'm not saying that number is too high or too low. I just feel like,
I just hope it's being spent on the child.
Exactly. I don't feel like the system in itself is doing the due diligence that is necessary to make sure these kids are in a good situation. Obviously, when they're in foster care, you have someone checking up on them, right? But once they're adopted, no one's checking up on these kids anymore. I feel like if you're getting a check for this child that you've adopted, you should still be checked. Somebody should be checking in on them.
Part of me, I really worry about civil liberties there, because after you've adopted a child, that's your child. No parent of a non-adopted child would want the government coming by once a week or once a month to make sure that they have a certain standard.
Well, stop taking the check every month then.
So you're saying just as long as they're getting the money, that there should be
somebody checking in just to make sure these people aren't just taking the money and do this as a business.
Maybe you could do that as some sort of like accounting instead of actually doing like home inspections and that sort of thing.
Maybe
Like
show the receipts where you're taking
invasive.
Jaleek to the doctor, well, not just Jaleek, any child to the doctor. You're, buying him clothes. You're, I don't know, paying his school lunch account with it, whatever,
Right.
Taking him to the therapist.
It would have been a nice use of that, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. Having a toilet installed. Maybe. Maybe have a toilet installed. A sink.
Yeah. Basic hygiene seems pretty fucking important.
Oh God, yes. And you know what that strikes me about this particular case with the no running water? For me, like you would know this about me, but I have chickens like as a hobby. I don't have a lot of chickens. I have some chickens, right? These people kept chickens to raise eggs. Chickens are filthy. Okay? They are dirty. You cannot take care of chickens without getting dirty, right? If they're in a coop, you have to clean their, droppings out of that coop, right?
Okay.
There's a lot of cleanup that goes on with chickens. I cannot imagine, like, I'm a bit of a germaphobe.
Oh, doing that without running water?
Without running water.
Oh, God.
To go clean up later, right? What are you going to go jump in the creek afterward? I mean, no, you need to be able to clean up, and I don't know if they're making the kids do part of this, taking care of their animals, but that is unconscionable to make a kid go do that, and then he can't go get in the shower after.
I mean, it seems like all the hand sanitizer in the world wouldn't take care of that.
No. Hand sanitizer may, it'll kill germs, but it's not, scrubbing the poop off your hands.
Oh, dear God.
Anyway, I got a little off topic there, but yeah, I'm sorry. I did not realize I was going to rant so much about these people when I started this episode.
Well, they are colossal pieces of shit. I think we can agree there.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, we were talking about findjaleek.org, and that may be why it's been taken down, because I know that Jocelyn and Stephen have a lawyer to deal with things like this, so that may be why it's taken down. I don't know. It may have come down for some other reason, but it's not up any longer. Now, the police, a lot of times we talk about when kids go missing, how the police just drop the ball.
Right.
That did not happen. The chief of police in Greenwich was named George Bell, and he became super invested in this case.
Well, that's good. Glad to see someone was looking out for that poor kid.
I mean, immediately they're doing searches. They did helicopter searches. They had forest rangers. They had divers going places. They drained a pond.
So there was a body of water nearby?
Yep, and they drained it. They did more than just drain a pond. They ended up searching at sort of a base of a dam. They had divers go down in it. And this is a place they called the hellhole, because being at the base of a dam, stuff would just get sucked down in there. Mm-hmm. And it was a very dangerous place to dive. And these divers, sort of took their lives in their hands to go down there and dive for the body. And they did not find anything there either. But they didn't find anything. But they did a lot of searches.
Well, at least somebody was looking out for that kid's interest.
He got the FBI involved, the state police. He contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, used their resources.
Now, that is exactly the kind of chief of police you want, who doesn't have a problem with bringing in people who know better than him to help with the search.
Yeah. And, they were just regularly going over their budget, too, trying to find Jaleek.
Like that interagency politics, when that gets in the way of finding a missing person, it's so frustrating. Or solving any crime, really. No,
and he worked with them. But, he was really the head of the investigation. Like, he's the still one. It's not like the state police or the FBI. They weren't doing the press conferences.
Right.
It was the chief. And, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I got the picture that he was just so invested in it. They felt like he was the one to head it up, and they just sort of assisted, because this guy, like, of all the missing persons cases we looked at, I've never seen the cops be this devoted to one. And it's just terrible that they never found anything, right? But again, he used every resource available. And he did for years and years. It's not like it was just
some silver lining to this case.
But, at least we had somebody out there looking out for Jaleek, because obviously his parents were, right? Now, Chief Bell, he was very suspicious of Stephen from early on. And, the suspicion is just built because, and as he said in multiple interviews, a 12-year-old child just doesn't fall off the face of the planet.
No.
Right? eventually you're going to find them somewhere. They don't have the resources to just disappear.
Right.
Or you would probably, and the way they searched, they would probably found a body or found him within a few days. And when they didn't, things are looking terrible because this is upstate New York in November. It is cold at night. And, I don't think a kid like Jaleek would just stay out there and freeze to death. I think he would show up somewhere.
So were they asking the father and mother serious questions by this point?
Yeah, and they were not cooperative at all.
And he never got around to answering why he didn't call the police for an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half.
Now, I can't say he didn't tell the police that.
We just don't know.
We just don't know. He hasn't, his lawyer hasn't issued a statement of why he didn't do it. Right.
It seems like if his lawyer had a good explanation, he would give it to the public.
Yeah, you would think so. Now, again, Chief Bell has said they have been just notoriously uncooperative with this. Stephen wouldn't give them all the answers they needed to things. He wouldn't tell them things. They actually wouldn't let them search the house. Now, initially, they let him search the house when Jaleek first went missing, but at the time, they didn't suspect foul play.
Right. But
they're just looking for Jaleek, see if there's any clues of where he went, right? But later on, he wouldn't let him search the house, just very uncooperative. Chief Bell actually said, this is weird, right? Said that when Stephen Kerr would come to the police department, he wouldn't touch the door when he opened it. Like he was afraid to leave his fingerprints.
Are you shitting me?
They said he used his elbow to open the door.
Now, okay, this motherfucker's guilty. Can we just be honest?
I'm going to say
he killed his kid.
I think it's very possible he did. I'm going to say a lot of times when I go in a place, if there's a kick plate on the door, I will use a kick plate because
you are a germaphobe.
I'm a germaphobe. This man didn't have running water. He was not a germaphobe.
Right.
So I don't know why he wouldn't touch the damn door.
Well, I think you know exactly why he wouldn't touch the damn door.
He didn't leave his fingerprints. He also declined to give his DNA. Another strange thing, and we always talk about how, don't do a polygraph test.
Look, I'm the first person to tell you, don't take a polygraph test and don't give police your DNA. But when your own child is missing, the rules are a little different.
Well,
I'm concerned about civil liberties, but in that situation, I don't think I would be, right? I'd be worried about finding my damn kid.
Exactly. And I'm going to say the weird thing about the polygraph is Jocelyn, the wife, took a polygraph, but Stephen refused. I think that's weird that, if the lawyer advised Stephen not to take one, he should have advised Jocelyn not to take one as well.
I mean, look, I stand, even in cases like this, for right now, it seems like they're guilty. I still wouldn't recommend taking a polygraph, and it's not just because it's a violation of rights, but because they're just not reliable.
Oh, no.
Police should probably stop using them.
They're not. They're not. And I don't want to issue a lot of judgment about the polygraph. It just adds up with everything else in the picture, right? Now... also Bell was saying that they just didn't act like your normal worried parents,
that's surprising.
They never talked to the police without their attorney present.
You mean the hippie chicken farmers without running water?
They had to have their attorney present
used a
to talk
house?
to they had to have their attorney present.
So they believed in attorneys.
They very much.
So
apparently
now,
they very
now
much
we're
believe
civilized.
In attorneys. Okay. They have done a few statements, but almost every statement of anything they've released has come through that attorney. They've done a few interviews, but mostly it's all through the attorney. Now they didn't, Chief Bell said they didn't, how a lot of times, the parents will sort of set up shop at the police station.
Well, yeah.
They didn't stay at the police station.
Like there are parents who, I hate to say it, put it like this, but there are parents of missing children or missing loved ones who irritate the shit out of police, right?
Oh, yeah.
They ride them constantly wanting updates. You expect that, though.
Well, I'm going to tell you something else that's even weirder than this.
Okay, lovely.
There would be vigils for Jaleek.
Mm-hmm.
And at least one of those vigils, possibly more than one, Stephen was selling eggs.
Oh, mother.
And not for a reward, raise a reward money or anything. It's just selling eggs at the vigil.
Missing parent / egg merchant. I hate these fucking people, Daniel. I hate them.
Oh, I understand. You're not the only one. There was another case where there was a vigil being held for Jaleek, and Stephen was seen going around town taking down the flyers for it. And when asked about it, he actually told the media he was taking those down because the people that were organizing the vigil were disparaging him, saying false things about him. Apparently, it was the grandma and the respite care lady from the Find Jaleek Task Force that were putting it on.
So he was taking down flyers for a vigil for his son because someone said mean things about him.
Well, let's be honest. They wouldn't have been saying mean things about him if he had just cooperated with police and told them everything he knew. Right? So, yeah, that's exactly it. He didn't want them to hold a vigil for Jaleek because they didn't like him. And, it's not just that. It's not just
the prosecution.
We'll get to it. You probably won't be happy about it. It's not just the vigil. Obviously, if this flyer's up, it draws attention to the fact that Jaleek's missing.
Oh, mother.
But no, let's take him down. So,
I've heard of parents, like in the Dior Kuntz case, right? You had them suspiciously dodging mainstream media attention. But this is even a step further. This isn't just not accepting an invitation to go on, Maury Povich, right? This is active. What year is this, right? I forget.
Yeah.
This is actively taking down flyers that are already up of your child.
Yeah.
It's not just that you're not adding extra awareness. You're subtracting from the awareness that was already there.
And this has been a huge criticism of Stephen Kerr.
Yeah, no.
And, very, very much fairly so. Now we talked about Elaine Person, and we mentioned Barbara Reilly, who was Jocelyn McDonald's mother. She has, she doesn't even speak to Jocelyn anymore. They've had a falling out because, she doesn't believe they're being honest and coming forward to police with information they know.
Well, that's surprising.
She suspects something. Now, Barbara has told police a story about Stephen losing his temper with Jaleek once. Apparently, Jaleek was doing something to get on Stephen's nerves. And Stephen kept saying, hey, stop that. And Jaleek wouldn't stop it.
Was he trying to go to the bathroom?
No, I think he was making some noise, like drumming on the table or something like that. And he kept saying, stop it. Jaleek wouldn't stop. So Stephen snaps, loses his temper. He grabs Jaleek, drags him out back, and shoves his head under the creek and holds it there until Jocelyn makes him stop.
Excuse me?
This is a story.
He held his child's head underwater?
This is a story that Barbara really told police.
Does she claim to have seen this firsthand?
And I don't know. I think it was something Jocelyn told her.
Okay.
But you have that. She also really drew into question the whole $1,500 check per child they're getting, for the two special needs children. And she says she now believes, at the time she thought they were doing that for the right reasons, but it just eventually became, this is income.
If that story is true, he was clearly violently abusive.
It definitely seems that way. Now Jocelyn,
and that's not the kind of thing that happens one time just because you lost your temper, right? Normal people do not go that far when they lose their temper.
No, and this is also according to Barbara Reilly that on more than one occasion, Jocelyn made him leave the house and stay somewhere else for a few days because of his anger issues that he was having with the kids.
Oh, he killed the kid.
Yeah, it does kind of sound that way, doesn't it? So this is just more evidence you have.
And according to that story, he didn't even stop himself, did he?
No, Jocelyn stopped him. It's terrible, but there's more, and this is all circumstantial. I don't realize this is all circumstantial, right? It's not hard evidence, but there's even more to that.
If even half of this is true, their lack of cooperation, that god-awful story, and the way they lived, it's circumstantial, but if I was on the jury, guilty.
I completely understand. There's more though. There's even more to these things that Barbara said. And this is, while it's not as shocking to me as some of the other things Barbara said, this is just one of the weirdest to me. So the day that Jaleek was missing, right? Jocelyn called her mom and said, "We need you to come over here. Jaleek's missing." So she drives over to Stephen's parents' house where she goes, and Barbara is concerned because their son Robin has a doctor's appointment. She's got to get him to the doctor's appointment. And Stephen's saying, "I need to go into work. My boss is having a birthday party in the office today." And Barbara's like, "Well, I'm going to go drive around and look for Jaleek."
Oh my God. A birthday party?
I think it was a birthday, some kind of office party for his boss. Yeah.
That was more important than finding Jaleek.
Well, that was what he was concerned about at the time.
I don't even know what to say to that.
I don't either, to be honest with you.
Hell, it's no worse than the movie rental.
I have said so many times when we talk about stuff like this, there's no playbook. There's no certain way you're supposed to act.
But there are certain ways you're not supposed to act.
And that's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of them right there. Again, that's not even really evidence. That's just evidence they were shitty parents, really. That's not evidence of any kind of guilt. Honestly, to me, I feel like if he had killed him, was trying to cover it up, he would act a little more concerned at that point, right?
Maybe. I don't know what to think at this point.
I don't either, but that's something I feel like is important to throw in there. Now, in 2008, Barbara, the grandmother, she petitioned the court to have custody of Jaleek transferred to her. Now, she wanted to do this because there are some legal obstacles when you're trying to locate someone. She couldn't legally obtain his medical records, or if you're contacting a homeless shelter, for instance, to find out if Jaleek's there.
And the parents wouldn't do any of this stuff for her?
No. If you're not his parent, you can't necessarily inquire if he's there, right? If you're not his legal guardian. And, the parents aren't doing this stuff. And obviously she's not even getting along with the parents. They're not even talking at this point because she thinks they've done something to Jaleek, or more in line with, she felt like Stephen had done something with Jaleek.
And she was cutting Jocelyn was covering it up.
Jocelyn was just either being, willfully ignorant of it or covering it up. Now, and she wanted to do these things for Jaleek, and the courts would not allow it. But also, she said that if Jaleek was found and came back home, she wanted him to have a good stable home to come to, because obviously they were trying to get rid of him.
Yeah, clearly,
and things weren't going well for him there. So she wanted to be able to bring him home, but the courts denied her gaining custody. Now, also in 2008, Stephen was officially named a person of interest in this.
Well, that's promising, at least.
At least you.
Do we know why? Other than the obvious, is lack of refusal to cooperate. Just lack of cooperation. You had a lot of circumstantial evidence.
There's a few other things I want to get into here. One is that the night that Stephen brought Jaleek home from the respite care, he told police, which route they took coming home. And they could tell by cell phone pings he did not take that route, but he stuck by his story. That's strange in and of itself. Also,
how accurate is that, though?
It's accurate enough they know he didn't take the route that he said he took.
Okay.
They couldn't say exactly which way he went, but by the cell phone pings, they knew he wasn't where he said.
Just by what towers it was pinging?
Just by the towers it was pinging from, right. Now, another really strange thing is that it was around midnight, a little after midnight, early on the morning of the 2nd of November. Now, that's, 7:30 in the morning is when he woke up and found Jaleek missing on the 2nd, right?
Right.
So this is on the 2nd, in the early morning, just a little after midnight. A security camera at a local bank catches a gold-colored van drive by. That matched pretty much exactly a van that belonged to Stephen's father that stayed at the house there.
Really?
Yeah. And obviously Stephen said they went to bed at 9:00 and didn't leave again that night. And Stephen.
And what time was this?
It was a little after midnight. And Stephen wouldn't let them investigate the van to try and match it to that one or do any work with that.
That's incredibly suspicious.
Incredibly suspicious. Though, honestly, if he'd let him look at the van, I wouldn't have really questioned it, because, how many vans that look like that could there be?
true. But given the rest of the information,
and the fact that he said, no, you're not looking at it.
Right.
But then again, that's just par for the course. He didn't cooperate with anything in the investigation. He just, and he said later that he wouldn't cooperate with the investigation because, police were accusing him of doing something and looking at him. But I mean, you would think that's all the more reason to cooperate.
But it seems like that went the other way though, right? That they started looking at him because he wouldn't cooperate, not the other way around.
Well, his continued uncooperation. How about that? Right. Now, I said those are just a couple more suspicious things.
So did anything come of this? This person of interest naming?
No, other than just the fact that he was named as a person of interest. Not really. No, he was never charged. And there's more to this, but he's never been charged or anything like that. They never really found much evidence. Now, let's talk about a little more evidence, though. 2008, Barbara Reilly, the grandmother, was arrested and charged with burglary. And what had happened is Stephen and his wife and the rest of the family, had moved to Vermont. Possibly to get away from some media attention or just get away from this painful thing that happened to them. Whatever. They moved.
Right. Either way.
Well, their house was unlocked, and Barbara went over to their house, their like shack house or whatever, right? And just poking around looking for evidence with a flashlight. And
how'd she get caught?
I think the neighbor saw her in there at night with a flashlight, and it's just, somebody's over here. So they called the cops. And obviously, like, the cops had to arrest her.
Right.
But it kind of seems like the cops benefited from this because Barbara saw something in that house.
Really?
And just, a few weeks later, the cops executed a search warrant on it and found the same thing Barbara found.
Well, that's interesting.
It was a yellow fleece pullover that Jaleek was reported to have been wearing when he went missing.
That's similar to the Dior Koontz case.
It's very similar. The same piece of clothing.
Except there was that camouflage jacket he was supposed to be wearing that was found, was reportedly found in the
home.
Interesting.
So, and that in of itself, like, I cannot say that's no kind of smoking gun, right? Because, obviously, like, the kid was at, somebody else's house for a week. You may not have known exactly what he was wearing. Though you would think if you found it later, you'd say, hey, I found this. This wasn't what he was wearing.
Right.
And then they just leave the damn thing in the house when they leave. Like, it's no big deal. But yeah, Barbara.
That's the same thing that the Dior Koontz is, under the same circumstances, right? They had been evicted and they left his belongings.
Yep. Now, there's another, and I can't say this is evidence of one thing or another, but this is one of the strangest things in this case. In January of 2008, an anonymous letter was sent to the local press.
Okay.
And it was claiming that Jaleek was alive and well, and he had been picked up that night. And it's a really strange letter. I'm going to read it to you verbatim, so you'll see how weird this letter is. It says, Jaleek still alive. Needed a foot soldier for this war on drugs. Picked him up at Route 40, Post 30. He's okay. No fake.
Oh, well, there we go. Authenticated.
He asks his mama and papa, who are the Macaroni family? My cat named Diamond, ? Why does Franti yell fire? Don't try to look. We are not there.
What in Sam hell does any of that mean?
I think it means someone was trolling the local press.
Yeah, that's probably
the police.
Like, I can't even tell what they were trying to get at there.
I can't either. No, I have no idea. The police were not able to, verify any kind of source of this, like where it may have come from, who may have seen it.
That was just gibberish.
No idea. Now, however, Kerr and McDonald's lawyer jumped on this and claimed it was proof that Jaleek was still alive because it had information in it that only Jaleek would have known. This is supposed to have been a good lawyer, right? This is proof Jaleek's alive. That bunch of gibberish is proof that Jaleek's alive.
Okay.
Apparently, because he at one point had a cat named Diamond, that is proof that Jaleek's alive.
Oh my God, that is ludicrous.
So yeah, the craziest part about the whole story to me is that how their lawyer jumped on that is like, oh, it's proof he's alive and well.
Now, one question: if he did actually have a cat named Diamond, and that's not just the BS of the dad, could the dad have written it or someone?
Oh, I mean, they thought that maybe like Jocelyn or Stephen wrote it, but I don't know if they put together that bunch of nonsense either.
Because he could just be lying about the cat named Diamond, right?
Yeah, there was no way to prove who wrote it or where it came from, so it's hard to say. I I don't know they're that dumb to write some crazy shit like that.
I mean, can you imagine pointing to that as evidence that your kid's still alive?
No, not at all. It's just insane. Nothing else really happened with this until December of 2012, where they actually, just with input from the FBI and some of the other agencies they're working in, they decided to redesignate the case as, instead of a missing child, as a probable child homicide.
That seems about right.
I think that is safe to assume. At that point,
I'd love to think otherwise, but
yeah, I mean, at that point, if Jaleek had not resurfaced, something had happened to him. And at the time, the parents issued a statement through the lawyer again that they hope this didn't lessen any efforts by authorities to find Jaleek, and that they knew that one day he'd come home to them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The fact that you've been trying to get rid of this kid and you think he's going to come back home, you want him to come back
You've done nothing that would suggest you want that kid to come back home.
No, I'm going to say, like, initially, yeah, they did get out there with the searches and early on and have vigils and stuff for him. But just as time kept going on, they became less and less cooperative, and just they didn't act like a concerned parents.
Yeah, no,
they didn't act like concerned parents from the beginning, but they didn't behave as they should have, especially going forward.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's probably safe to say that he was murdered. He met with foul play. Even if Stephen didn't do anything to him, I think that it's very likely during his, trying to run away, that, he met with some foul play.
Right. And I think the former is much more likely at this point.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about stuff like this before, about how, remember with A Should Agree, about how, like, if she really did, just run away on her own.
I think she was lured
right?
away.
I think she was lured away, right? But if she just ran away on her own and happened to meet with a child abductor in the middle of the night going down the road, I mean, what are the odds that Jaleek would have done the same thing if he had run away, that he just meets with someone that sounds like they're going to kill him?
I mean, the odds are extremely low.
Yeah, there's just, it doesn't make sense.
Though, at least with the Asha case, there is some evidence that may be true, because people reportedly saw her by herself before.
Yeah. No, and with A Should Agree.
But of course, one doesn't, like, that doesn't preclude someone luring her out.
No,
right?
I just didn't feel like the parents were involved with her. I felt like with that one, someone may have been grooming her, lured her out.
Asha's parents acted like parents should have.
Yeah. This one, they're not acting like parents. And I don't think being an adoptive parent is any excuse for that. No. But that's really, there's not a lot else to this case. Over the years, there have been a few times where something was found, like some bones or skull, and they think, oh, maybe this is Jaleek, and it never has been.
Sure, there's been plenty of spottings of him too, right?
Yeah. Now, they did an age progression drawing.
I saw it, yeah.
And they ended up pulling it down because it was just creating a ton of false leads, just constantly stuff coming in. This guy looks kind of like that, and they look into it. It's nothing. And eventually it was just, like getting up false hope. And I'm not saying like the police looked into all the leads on these. They did, but it never really did anything. Now,
have they, I'd love to see a child who was found who had an age progression done of them, to see how accurate it was.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a case like that?
I'm sure there has been, but I don't know any statistics on that. I'd like to see a study or something maybe, because it doesn't make sense to me how they can really be accurate. I mean, how can you just predict how someone's going to age? And maybe you can, right?
There may be certain consistencies, right?
Yeah. I just, I have no idea. I'd like to know, though.
Yeah.
But again, not much else has happened with this. Now, remember we talked about Chief George Bell, who really did a lot looking unfortunately.
Right, yeah.
He died unexpectedly in December of 2018.
That's a shame.
It's a shame too because they lost like a real warrior, a real advocate, out there looking for Jaleek. And it was a real loss for their local community because I can't say I don't know about anything else he's done, but at least the way he acted, the way he handled things in this case, he appeared to be a good cop. And we don't talk about good cops very often in our podcast because a lot of times it's police dropping the ball or just narrowing
that's just the nature of what we're doing, though.
It is.
There are so many great police officers right there.
But I'd like to talk about him as one of the good ones because we don't talk about him.
Right.
I mean, this guy, it was a big loss for his community. He was a great cop. From what I read, he in his 20 years as chief of police never missed a day of work.
Jesus.
And this was after a 40-year career. 20 of it as chief of police in Greenwich. And he reacted really quickly in Jaleek. He worked with all these other agencies. I mean, they investigated hundreds of leads just as soon as they came in. This guy was out there doing everything. He was going over budget for the police department. He was doing all the media interaction, with the FBI, for all these other agencies. He left no stone unturned. So let's just say, Police Chief George Bell,
we salute you.
We salute you, and we know you are missed by your community.
Do we know how he passed?
It was unexpectedly. He just sort of developed some flu-like symptoms and then died a couple days later.
And when was this?
2018.
Okay, I was thinking maybe COVID.
Yeah, I don't think COVID was around. I mean,
probably not.
They haven't traced it back that far, so hopefully not. And that's pretty much the end of the case. Like I said, Barbara Reilly now, the grandmother, she has not spoken to her daughter or her grandchildren in 14 years now because of this, tear in their family.
I mean, can you blame her?
Well, no, but I'm sure she misses those grandkids.
I'm sure she does, but
and I get it. Like.
I'm just glad someone in the family is not delusional.
No.
Or covering something up.
And I've got to say, there are cases where something happens to a child and the grandparents and the parents just have a split over it. And were cases where the parents necessarily didn't do anything wrong or not as badly as this, right? There was a local case. I shouldn't say case. It was just an instance I'm familiar with where a baby died. I don't remember if she was having tummy time or if the baby may have rolled over. I think the baby was having tummy time and the mom walked out of the room and came back in and the baby had gone to sleep and smothered, right? And she was just completely ostracized by the grandparents and stuff, which she made a mistake, but these are not the same thing. The same thing, you know what I mean? And this is, I feel like, I can't say that, when you have two parents like this, like Curry McDonald, that are so terrible, I mean, was it maybe some of their parents' fault? Were their parents not great parents?
Probably.
Maybe not. I don't know the full extent of this.
I just don't think we can push the moral responsibility that
I'm
far
not,
back.
I'm not trying to do that.
Particularly after you have children. Right?
I'm not trying to do that. But what I'm trying to say is I feel like you could at least call into question if all the stories that Barbara told are completely true.
Fair enough.
But anyway, no matter how you take all that, even if they did not murder Jaleek, right? They're still guilty because they were such terrible parents. He ran away.
And they did jack shit to help find him.
And they didn't act like parents. So I cannot say with 100% certainty that Stephen Kerr killed his son.
I can say with 100% certainty that I would vote guilty out of just pure spite, likely.
Well, I mean, obviously, with the way he acted, he probably deserves it.
Yeah.
But I can't say that. I think it's likely, but we can't say that for sure. We have to remember that these were people that took in foster kids and took care of them, and this may have, who
may or may not have done it for their money.
Well, even the grandmother says she thinks they started this with the right intentions.
Right.
And then things may have just devolved, right? So at one point, maybe these people had good intentions and it just went astray. I don't know. I don't know.
I'd love to believe that, but judging by the way they behaved, it's just hard to
Right. Now,
Hard to imagine that.
I will say though, like we mentioned this earlier, I said I was going to come back to it. I don't think it's one of those things that he had planned ahead of time to kill him. Like if he did kill him,
well, with his kind of explosive temper, it wouldn't need to be.
No,
though, right?
I think it very well could have just been like things just got out. Maybe Jaleek had one of his fits at the house, and things just got out of hand, and he killed him. Now, there was a one phone call that this may support that just a little bit. One phone call around 8:00 that Stephen Kerr got on his cell phone while they were on their way back. I think after they left Red Robin going to the house, right? And it was a friend of Stephen's, and he said that Stephen seemed very agitated, angry on the phone, and that he made a lot of, sort of mean, angry comments about Jaleek, and it seemed that Jaleek was in the vehicle with him, and he was saying that stuff in front of Jaleek. Oh my God. So it seems like they were probably arguing that night. Probably things weren't going really well for them.
That poor kid, man. He had such a rough life.
Oh my God. He was born into a rough life, and just his whole life.
One bad environment to the next.
Well, now I won't say one bad environment to the next. Some of these foster families that care of him really cared about him.
Fair enough, because we don't know the whole history. That's true.
And it's just maybe they just were not equipped to deal with his sort of emotional issues.
And we still don't know what special needs in this case means either.
We know that he had we know he had these outbreaks, right? He had these psychiatric problems.
But it wasn't like a learning disability sort of thing?
He had some developmental issues, but from what I understand, he had those, but it was mostly the psychiatric mental issues that were the big problem.
Okay. Now,
I'm not saying he didn't have developmental issues. Obviously, a child that's born addicted to both alcohol and crack is going to have those.
Likely so, yeah.
But they were not as severe as his mental health issues. So it's one of the saddest cases I think we've.
Man, it's horrific from start to finish, and the way the parents behaved, it's abominable.
I'm glad though that there were other people like the police chief, like the grandmother, like the lady that did his respite care, that cared enough to really go out there and try to find Jaleek and do this work that his parents weren't doing.
Because that was sorely lacking in this case.
Sorely lacking. And at least there was someone out there to do that.
And at least one of them was the chief of damn police, someone who could really get things done.
Yeah. Jaliek Rainwalker was born to adversity. And through his short life, he faced even more adversity at seemingly every turn. If Jaleek was still alive today, he would be 26 years old. While this is possible, most experts seem to disagree and believe that he would have at least surfaced after reaching adulthood. Jaleek's story was sad from birth until his disappearance. He was troubled, though those that loved him say that at other times, he was a very happy child. I can only hope that those bright, happy times outnumbered the rest. We'd like to thank you for listening to Fact and Suspicion. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you'd like and subscribe.
It's just right down there.
Yep. And if you have any feedback for us, or if you'd like to suggest an episode for us to cover, we'd like for you to contact us.
As long as it's not Maura Murray.
I don't know if we can handle Maura Murray, but we'd like for you to contact us through email at factandsuspicion@gmail.com or through Twitter @andsuspicion. Again, thank you for listening.